In today's episode, we honor Bourbon Heritage Month by focusing on women in whiskey. We'll take you to one of our favorite events, New Orleans Bourbon Fest. This annual event brings hundreds of bourbon distillers and enthusiasts together for a week of tastings, paired dinners, seminars, and parties. At this year's fest, we caught up with master distiller Lisa Wicker to talk about her career and experiences during her time in the bourbon industry. Welcome to Brew and Boost.
Welcome to Brew and Boost.
We are here with Lisa Wicker from Saints and Monsters. Thank you so much for talking with us this afternoon, and we're excited to dive in.
I'm very happy to be here. It's fun being interviewed by two women too.
Did a lot of jobs in the industry, and so tell us a little bit about your background as far as how you got to where you are today.
It's a long story. I try to figure out a way to abbreviate it a little bit, but really got into it because I worked as a farmhand in wine. Got asked by two kindergarten mothers when my youngest daughter was in kindergarten. They were working in a tasting room for a winery in southern Indiana and said, "We can't find enough people to harvest. We are going to harvest ourselves. Would you be willing to do this?" And I'm like, yes, I would. And it's like changed everything. I was working in the arts, finishing projects in February, getting paid in September. And it was very great. It was rewarding work, right? But I love being outdoors. I don't mind getting dirty. And it's like, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. So I got hired by another winery after that. And again, 3 days in production, I know, like, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. I got lucky, and a woman that had been a retired Purdue professor, she was still a Purdue professor at the time, but she'd been working trying to help establish their viticulture program there, and then left Purdue to work with Lalaman yeast, and she saw something in me, and so she really pushed me along. The winemaker that trained me, he's crazy smart. He's still making wine, but he was really helpful too, along the way. So anyway, then I got offered, some people we've been buying grapes from Kentucky came, and the couple said, we're not going to have grapes for you next year. We're going to build a winery. And without any discussion beforehand, the winemaker I'd been impressed with, Lisa's ready. You should hire Lisa. So I thought I'd start as a consultant. I started going down there. I loved it. The countryside was beautiful, and the winemaker had given me the distilling bug too. We talked about whiskey all the time. We talked about distillation process all the time. His wife was smart enough he and his son proposed to still, and she's smart enough to say no. Right. And so anyway, so I was like, all right, Kentucky, and it was just a coincidence too. My oldest daughter's husband grew up just down the road from where I ended up making wine and building a winery, and got myself into distilling faster than I thought because the owners divorced, and I'd already been working with Steve and Paul Beam at Limestone Branch in the evenings already. So they offered me a full-time position 24 hours after I resigned the winery, and was there 3 years, right? And then got fired with the Luxco acquisition, right? And I understand that, right? You have to bring somebody in. And then thought I was going to have to go back in winemaking, and then Ted Huber of Starlight, and I don't know if the Starlight whiskeys are coming on strong, but hired me because his family had been making wine for generations, and they just added the grain distillery. So I distilled there for a year and a half, came back to Bardstown to work on a project that was recommended to me by Drew Colsveen, who's the master distiller for Willett. And he had a family friend that decided they were going to build the first craft distillery in Bardstown. So I oversaw that project, and then went out on my own. And Sampson and Surrey, who owned Widow Jane, called me, and They were my third client, and then I came on then first as a consultant. Then they moved me to vice president of distillation over all the distilleries, and there were 5 in the portfolio. Now there's 6, and I was spending all my time at Widow Jane. The brand was, rather small. They had a kind of a strong cult following, and I shifted their single barrel program into blends for their flagship. We kept the single barrel program alive, but then we turned the 10-year flagship. They wanted to keep the 10-year age statement on it, so I started blending across Kentucky, Tennessee, and Indiana.
Wow.
And we refined some of the products that were already on the market, and kind of shifted what we were focusing on. Quality-wise and blending-wise, and we got known for blending, so we continued to expand those kinds of products, and had some crazy success. The brand went off the charts during COVID.
Was poised for growth beforehand. But there's a long COVID story that I won't tell, but one of it is that I had 2 new products coming out, right? And I had to move. We just kept moving them up and trying to work as fast as we put some other things on the back burner, working as fast as we could. And the owner, who lived in Miami, called me and he goes, "What are you doing right now?" Because I was getting ready to close the distillery down. He left it up to me because I was in New York and he was not. And I said, "I'm standing in the rain crying because I'm getting we made it. We got those products on the truck. Now we're going to close the distillery down. We're going to scramble and get the distillery ready to be shut down for a while." And but the brand took off. I did 60 virtual tastings and podcasts during a 6-month period. Wow, that's awesome. Because the brand was just, and it was interesting too from a marketing perspective. It was tremendously helpful because, we're talking to people from all over the world,
Right.
but there's a few people that really stood out to me, and one was an older couple. And they lived in Seattle, Washington, and their grandson lived in Brooklyn, and he'd been buying, because they're sitting in a room with all this Widow Jane behind them, and they've got distillery-only releases and stuff, right? And over the years and the previous ownership and everything, I'm like, you have more Widow Jane than I have. And they said, our grandson's in Brooklyn. We visit there when we're there, but he always sends us this stuff, right? But you're looking at a customer, so, all the marketing demographics, like, oh, we're looking at this age group, and we're looking at this kind of person and this kind of income. I'm like, no, Widow Jane, we're selling to everybody. Everybody that's interested in whiskey we're selling to. We don't have a demographic. People are people.
Well, and I thought COVID really brought out some really awesome stuff with distillers and brewers, and you had to be super creative since people weren't coming to your store physically. You had to come up with very interesting things, and obviously those tastings were a hit and did really well.
Yes,
and we had to work through how they were going to get the samples, because we couldn't ship them the samples, so we'd have to talk to the distributor or to our sales team that happened to be in that state, and how you're trying to get product when people can't go purchase it, so it was crazy for a while, but you had to be on your toes.
Sort of like raising kids. You just didn't know what the next day was going to bring, right? You kind of had an idea.
The sun will shine. That's all I know tomorrow.
Yeah. And so we closed for 3 months. We come back and we just hit the ground running. We just did nothing let up after that. We're all social distance. We never passed a case of COVID at work. So that was great. But then the New York ABC, we did open our bar back up, and then we'd have to shut it back down, and then we'd open it back up. So the team was crazy flexible too. They were wonderful, right? They were so good, and they would drop new laws on Friday night, Friday afternoon. So it's like, okay, do we open tonight, or do we have to wait till Saturday and Sunday to open, right? Because we were only open over the weekends during that time, and it's like, oh, here we go again. Okay,
What's today?
Yeah, and no blame on them. Things were changing so rapidly, right? So, anyway, come back out of that, and it was time for me to come home. Heaven Hill purchased them, and I stayed on for 9 or 10 months after that, and I got recruited to come back to Kentucky and be CEO of Alltech Beverage.
Interesting project, but I got too far removed from whiskey. I just got too far removed from the whiskey, and started to lose myself in that a little bit. So I resigned there, did some consulting work, and then the most recent company, same thing. They reached out to me after I left Lexington. I've been with them as a consultant since early October. Came on with them permanently January 2nd. They announced it. and I'm no longer there. They just differences.
Went a different direction.
Just went a different direction. They were
Of all of your jobs, or of all the components of your jobs in the industry, which part is your favorite? What are you really most passionate about?
Oh my gosh. It really, I know this sounds too broad, but the whole process. I mean, I know this sounds ridiculous, but everywhere from being when the corn goes into the ground, when you can work, for several years working with a farmer out of Kentucky, a farmer in New York, a farmer in Pennsylvania, and just being hands-on when that stuff's happening, being able to fly back from New York but check on the corn crop in Kentucky, drive my truck out to the back roads and just check on the corn crop, and and one of the farmers that I adore, we've been on some panels together, and he grows for Makers, he grows grain to glass for Heaven Hill. Anyway, lots of large names, huge family farm. They've been doing this for decades. And one day he picks me up, he's always in his overalls, right? And picks me up in his overalls in his brand new Tesla, so we can go check that. So I think some of the stories that come out of all of this, because every person I'm talking about right now, with the farmers, I have got a story on all of them, right? And then the truck drivers, even the truck drivers. So I had done some contract distilling, mostly at Castle and Key, but then with COVID, I got backed up with some corn and had to go somewhere else. And one of the truck drivers, because they were coming from South Africa, because since the agricultural seasons are flipped, they came to run a lot of corn. And one of them, he sees me and he's honking and he jumps out of the truck. He's like, "Why are you here?" But it's that. Those sorts of the horn honking, the jumping out of the truck, giving you a bear hug, and getting back in his truck, but those sorts of relationships are just priceless. I just love all of that. And scale, I love working really small. I love working really big. For 7 years, I was the consulting distiller for George Washington's whiskey at Mount Vernon for the historic project, and so that's very small, right? We're setting 120-gallon fermenters and things, which is how I started at Limestone Branch. On a small pot still, and so that
I love that. I love that very hands-on, experience, and having to work without temperature controls and without,
That's tricky.
It is tricky, but also, it keeps you on, like I said, it keeps you on your toes, and there's no place to hide. There's nowhere to hide. And so, but some crazy stories over the 7 years coming out of there, and then. So the farmers, the truck drivers, the customers, there's just the culture of whiskey is so interesting because, I know some spirits have it, but I don't know that any other spirit besides whiskey has the camaraderie and the friendships and the relationships that come out of whiskey.
We've noticed that here at the Bourbon Fest is people come every year just to hang out with their friends that they've met at the Bourbon Fest. So
that's it
cool.
exactly. That's it exactly. Yeah. So and living in Bardstown too, you run into everybody, and I know Denny Potter and Jane Bowie are here somewhere. I haven't seen them here, but Denny lives around the corner from me in Bardstown. Jane doesn't live very far. They, I ran into them at my daughter's bar because she owns a bar downtown at Bardstown. And then one day I'm at my oldest grandson's cross country meet, and Jane's there. So she's been master maturation at Maker's Mark. Denny had been was still master distiller at Maker's Mark. John Hargrove, who's with Whiskey House, had been with Barton, and then so he's there because his daughter's running. And then two more people from Willett, and Jane we were laughing. We were like, all these people. They're like, oh yeah, we want to meet some distillers. They just need to come to the public school cross country.
Who knew? Who knew that was a hot spot?
Yeah, but it's like that. It's like even the farmer, that I was telling you about. He lives in Bardstown, and a couple times he's just honked his horn because he's seen me out in my yard, and he's got a bottle of whiskey in his back seat, and he hands it out the window and takes off. It's like delivery. So those stories, right? Those relationships. Getting through some really bad, hard stuff with people, and then it cements your relationship, even though you've had to be on opposite sides with them as vendors or something, right? It's like, okay, this isn't working out. They're either telling me this isn't working out because you're bringing us corn that's breaking our roller mill, or me having to say, guys, I can't handle what you're doing anymore. We gotta
Yeah.
you sit down at the table, and it ends up cementing your relationship, your friendship and relationship, rather than pulling you. Like, I think a lot of industries, you would just like, well, I'm not talking to that person later, but you've worked through this problem together, and you've literally sat down at a table and said, how are we going to fix this? I love all of it. I just love all of it.
Well, I feel like the whiskey world is smaller than people imagine, and everybody knows everybody, and so you have to continue those relationships, because you can't, because then you'd work with no one. if you abandoned every relationship, if there was a hard time, you'd work with no one. So
I use the analogy, it's like your family. It's like, okay, you and your sisters might be picking on one another, but don't let anybody from outside pick on your sister.
yeah,
Exactly.
Right? And so there's a lot of that too, where it's like, okay, yeah, we might be, direct competitors, but we're friendly direct competitors, and we may have had an issue together, but don't let anybody else say anything bad about that person, right? And forget that, because no, they're good. They're good people. We're just
So since you have worn many hats in the whiskey industry, is there something that you haven't done yet that you want to try, that you want to dabble in?
Oh gosh, that's an excellent question. I have to think on it. Oh my gosh. Maybe even, I know this sounds crazy, but maybe settling in somewhere for a little bit, right? Like, I would love to go to work for an established brand where I'm not reinventing the wheel from the ground up, because then it's a different launching pad from going from there on past to see what else can be pushed, or what else can be done. And I have not had that luxury. I've been with, Widow Jane was established, but it was established on source single barrels, right? So there was a whole project to go. So there was a springboard there, right? Because there's already brand in place and everything. Limestone Branch, we were reinventing the wheel there. We were doing some client work and having to oh my gosh, how are we going to do this, right? We had come up with Moon Pie Moonshine at the request of the Moon Pie family, the bakery. They asked us to do that, and it's like, we're like, oh yeah, we're going to do that, and it's like, oh no, what have we done, right? How are we going to do this? So I love that problem solving, but it would be fun to come into a place where some of the initial problem solving had been done, and then work with some established brands, and like I said, push the envelope on that, or help with the consistency.
you don't think it'd be
that's funny. My son, who's my middle child, I've got 2 girls and a boy, and he's like, one job came up with a large distillery. Well, actually 2 different positions where they reached out to me to talk to me, and my son's like, you're going to be really bored. And I think it's more like, if you're bored, then you're going to be bugging us.
That's funny. That's funny.
Let's keep mom busy.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you haven't ever done that.
Okay, sure. Yeah.
So now you do some education piece. Did I hear you say? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I've had the opportunity, over the years to teach some master classes. So some of that's happened organically, where you start teaching. It's like, okay, well, I got to brush up here. I'm teaching a master class to people that know whiskey inside and out, right? So I've got really got to think this through. For a couple years in a row, we had the largest Peterson Farms, working with Widow Jane, we had the largest heirloom corn crop for whiskey in the United States, right? So the corn standards for yellow dent don't cover using heirloom corn on a large scale. So there's a learning curve there. So you're sitting down, and then having to do the back work on it, right? And educate yourself on that. And like, okay, now, somebody's like, oh, well, we're just going to bring this in. Like, you're not going to just bring that in likely. And the reason why is because you might break the roller mills.
Yeah.
There's that. So, yeah, I've had the good fortune, and UK did have me lecture a few years ago, but it was before the program had really gotten organized. And so, yeah, it looks like I'm going to have some opportunities coming up, and I'm really excited about that.
And years ago, I think, and I may be wrong with the statistics, but I think California was one of the first to sort of put viticulture into there. And so how has that changed? University of Kentucky, places like that. I'm sure they have programs specifically for somebody who wants to become a distiller.
Yes, they do now, and it's actually still relatively new. Yeah, I did a lot of my coursework I patched together at University of California, Davis at the
They were one of the first, weren't
Yes,
they? Really,
the
to
Robert
sort
and
of-
Marguerite Mondavi Center, right? The Mondavis ended up financing. UC Davis already had the programming, and then they came in, kind of like James B. Beam Institute is at University of Kentucky. So named after, the biggest industry benefactor, right? And but that place was just so state of the art, and because I was raising kids, I had to patch my education together, and I'd go out there for intensives and that sort of thing. So out of that, Purdue University has got a viticulture program. Cornell has got a viticulture program. So they're definitely addressing like the middle part of the differences in climate and soil and grape varietals and things in the middle part of the country, and then of course Cornell's the whole country, but also concentrated in the East Coast. And University of Kentucky is doing the same thing now with the distillation program, right? It's got a hands-on teaching distillery.
Yeah, because it's definitely an agricultural product.
Oh, it's so I had the lucky opportunity with American Craft Spirits Association we lobbied. It took us, oh my gosh, several years to get, and I was just a warm body. I was not one of the organizers. I just showed up to help lobby, and for the FET reduction, so federal excise tax reduction for craft distillers for a break up to the first few 100,000 gallons. Well, there was some opposition because they're like, well, the big guys are going to get the break. I'm like, well, for the big guys, that's just a drop in the bucket. It really isn't, if they get it, great, but it's not really going to make a difference in their bottom line like it is with craft distillers. But they used me in a way because I was from Kentucky. I had one foot in Kentucky, one foot in New York. So I ended up in McConnell's office and Schumer's office.
I bet you have some time off. What are you gonna go do? Are you gonna go travel? Are you gonna go hang out with your family? Like, what's next?
I think all the above, but I have a couple things that people are talking to me about already, so we'll see where those things go. I'm going to be patient, and but I think I'm going to get my truck tuned up, and I am going to just start visiting I've got so many wonderful open invitations to different distilleries around the country that I have not taken people up on. Cool. And it's a way for me to educate myself too, right? And get a little bit more current, because you can definitely get, tunnel vision to whatever you're working on, and think that in the beginning you're taking in all this information and processing it, but then you're starting to get a little bit better with your skill set, right? And so you start to find your niche, and you're kind of going this direction, and you realize, well, gosh, I haven't talked to that person, I haven't talked to this person, and I see what he's doing, and oh my gosh, I briefly read he's doing something new with yeast. I need to get there. So so I think I'm gonna do that, and just kind of head north, a little bit slightly west, then head out east, come down. So I'm fishing with a couple New York distillers, and I've got a new grandson in DC, so we'll do that, and then I think I'll get on a plane and head west and visit some distilleries out west as well.
We love talking to you.
Thank
always
you so
fun.
much.
It's always fun. And
Thank you so
well,
much.
good luck going forward for whatever fun thing you find to do.
I don't think I've ever been on an all-woman
Really?
interview before. This is
Really?
wonderful.
Joining the fun at New Orleans Bourbon Fest. Tickets are available now. Go to NewOrleansBourbonFest.com for tickets to the 2025 event, which takes place March 19th through the 23rd, 2025. Use the code BREWED10 to get a discount. See you there.